Welcome to Shadowed Tales, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs, and the unknown waits just beyond the shadows. Here, we delve into the mysteries that defy explanation, the whispers of forgotten legends, the chilling truths hidden in plain sight, and the horrors that lie beneath the veil of the everyday. Are you brave enough to uncover what lurks in the darkness? Do you dare question the stories the world wants you to forget? Open your mind, steel your nerves, because here, every tale holds a secret, and every shadow has a story. Some stories are so horrifying, they seem like they could only come from the depths of a nightmare. But this one is tragically real. This is the story of Dean Corll, a name that once meant nothing to the world, but is now forever linked to one of the most chilling crime sprees in American history. Born on December 24, 1939, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Dean Corll grew up in a troubled home. His mother, Mary, moved to Texas with Dean and his younger brother. There, she started a small candy business, where Dean would later earn the nickname the Candyman. But behind this seemingly ordinary life, darkness was festering. Throughout the 1960s, Corll worked at his mother's candy company, where he became known for handing out free treats to local children. His friendly demeanor masked a sinister truth. It was during this time that Corll formed disturbing relationships with two young men, David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, who would later become his accomplices. Between 1970 and 1973, Corll is known to have killed a minimum of 28 victims. All of his victims were males, aged 13 to 20, the majority of whom were in their mid-teens. Most victims were abducted from Houston Heights, which was then a low-income neighborhood northwest of downtown Houston. In most of these abductions, he was assisted by one or both of his teenage accomplices, David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley. Several victims were friends of one or both of Corll's accomplices. Others were individuals with whom Corll had himself become acquainted prior to their abduction and murder. And two other victims, Billy Balch and Gregory Malley Winkle, were former employees of Corll Candy Company. Corll's victims were usually lured into either one of the two vehicles he owned, a Ford van and a Plymouth GTX, or a 1969 Chevrolet Corvette he is known to have purchased for Brooks in early 1971. The enticement was typically an offer of a party or a lift, and the victim would be driven to Corll's house. At Corll's residence, the youths would be plied with alcohol or other drugs until they passed out, tricked into donning handcuffs, or simply grabbed by force. They were then stripped naked and tied to either Corll's bed or usually a plywood torture board, which was regularly hung on a wall. Once manacled, the victims would be sexually assaulted, beaten, tortured, and sometimes after several days, killed by strangulation or shooting with a .22 caliber pistol. Their bodies were then tied in plastic sheeting and buried in one of four places: a rented boat shed in southwest Houston, a beach on the Bolivar Peninsula, a woodland near Lake Sam Rayburn, where Corll's family owned a lakeside log cabin, or a beach in Jefferson County. In several instances, Corll forced his victims to either phone or write to their parents with explanations for their absences in an effort to allay the parents' fears for their son's safety. He is also known to have retained keepsakes, usually keys, from his victims. During the years in which he abducted and murdered his victims, Corll often changed addresses. However, until he moved to Pasadena in the spring of 1973, he always lived close to Houston Heights. On August 7, 1973, late in the evening, Henley and Corll got into a heated argument. They had kidnapped two young men, but Henley had broken their code and brought a young woman. Corll, furious at Henley, broke into a furious rage, and a fight ensued between the two. Henley, realizing he could now be Corll's next victim, grabbed a .22 caliber pistol and opened fire on Corll. He shot him 6 times, 3 times in the chest, once in the shoulder, and twice in the back. Corll tried to fight back and lunged at Henley, but after the final shots, he collapsed and died. At 8:24 a.m. on August 8, 1973, Henley placed a call to the PPD. His call was answered by an operator named Velma Lines. In his call, Henley blurted to the operator, "Y'all better come here right now. I just killed a man." Minutes later, a PPD patrol car arrived at 2020 Lamar Drive. Henley sitting on the curb outside the house, and the officer noted the .22 caliber pistol on the driveway near him. Elmer Wayne Henley identified himself and told the officer that he was the individual who had made the call and indicated that Corll's body was inside the house. After confiscating the pistol and placing Henley inside the patrol car, the officer entered the bungalow and discovered Corll's body inside the hallway. The officer returned to the car and read Henley his Miranda rights. Police initially were skeptical of Henley's claims, assuming the sole homicide of the case was that of Corll, which they had ascribed as being the result of drug-fueled fisticuffs that had turned deadly. Henley was quite insistent, however, and upon his recalling the names of victims, the police accepted that there was something to his claims, as all the teenagers were listed as missing at Houston Police Department. Inside the barn on Corll's property, the floor of the main room where teenagers had been tied was covered in thick plastic sheeting. Police also found a plywood torture board with handcuffs attached to nylon rope at the corners. Also found at Corll's address were a large hunting knife, rolls of clear plastic of the same type used to cover the floor, and 8 pairs of handcuffs, a number of lengths of rope. With Corll dead, the focus shifted to his accomplices. Both Henley and Brooks were arrested for their roles in the murders. Families of Corll's victims were highly critical of the HPD, which had been quick to list the missing boys as runaways who had not been considered worthy of any major investigation. During the trial of Corll's accomplices, Henley and Brooks' testimony described the gruesome acts committed during this horrifying murder spree. Henley had described luring 2 of the victims Henley had confessed that after their initial abuse and torture at Corll's home, 2 boys each had one wrist and ankle bound to the same side of Corll's torture board. The youths were then forced by Corll to fight each other with the promise that the one who beat the other to death would be allowed to live. After they had spent several hours beating each other, one was tied to a board and forced to watch the other captive be assaulted, tortured, and shot to death before he himself was again raped, tortured, and strangled. These boys were killed on July 27, 1973, 2 days after they had been reported missing. Several victims' parents had to leave the courtroom to regain their composure as police and medical examiners described how their relatives were tortured and murdered. On July 16, 1974, Elmer Henley was sentenced by Judge Preston Dial. Henley was convicted on only 6 counts of murder and ordered to serve each 99-year sentence consecutively, totaling 594 years. Brooks was brought to trial on February 27, 1975. He had been indicted for 4 murders committed between December 1970 and June 1973, but was brought to trial charged only with 1 murder. Brooks was found guilty of murder on March 4, 1975, and sentenced to life imprisonment. To this day, their testimonies remain the only glimpses into the horrifying mind of Dean Corll, and it serves as a grim reminder of the pure evil that can lurk behind a friendly smile. Thank you for venturing into the shadows with us. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a step deeper into the mysteries. Have your own theories or questions? Share them in the comments. Your insights might unlock the next secret we uncover. Until next time, keep your lanterns lit and your eyes on the shadows, for they hold the keys to hidden truths.